Sorry, what is VIS?
Okay, this is visual impairment.
Oh, okay.
For the VIS, as I was saying, it's a particular part of persons able differently. It is that they need a break after publicizing it all. Have you taken to their level, giving them a braille publication, whereby they can just feel it and understand, that they can read it by the braille. So this is not okay. Sometimes you may find some people cannot, they are not able to publicize it to the braille point, claiming to be expensive. But if you need the inclusivity, it can't be expensive because you need the input for the person, and nobody should be excluded. It's all we say inclusivity. So that is what I meant when I said that every kind of persons with a disability, persons need to come down to their level. And with that, it will be more effective. Go even to the person who are marginalized. If at all one doesn't go to their level, if at all they are dressing on shukas, if at all they are dressing, they are the different cultures. You have to go to their level so that they can understand. Even the Bible says that if at all you want to win their soul, that was Paul was talking about it. You have to take Apostle Paul was to take. You have to take the behavior and then you change them gradually. And that one you know how they are staying their behavior, and then you leave them. You win them.
Thank you, Paul. And I think that's very important. Come to the level of the people you want to interact with. What is their culture? What is their limitations? How to interact with them? And that's very true. And tying to what you said, you talked about issues around inclusivity. And I know that most of the times how we engage in terms of inclusivity is tied down to policy. So I want to ask you, Masi, how do national and international policies shape the implementation of environmental and social safeguards in projects? But also, what roles do government and regulatory bodies play in enforcing these safeguards mechanisms?
Yeah, thank you for that question. First of all, reflecting on the Constitution, on our national values and principles, one of them is participation, transparency, and accountability. And it mandates both state and non-state actors to ensure that they promote these national values and principles. And particularly, I want to refer to the various policies, and in this context, maybe the Data Protection Act, that requires that even as we engage these particular target groups, we must ensure that they are aware of the information we're obtaining from them and what we intend to use of that information. And also looking at the Children's Act, which requires that in everything you do, you must promote the best interest of a child. And this includes seeking consent from their guardians and parents while engaging them. It could be maybe training them in school on environmental protection and conservation. The school has to give you that consent. And in this context, they work as an agent of the parent. And so they represent their parents, who are the principals in this case. And so consent must be obtained and best interest must be promoted. And the Children's Act is very clear on issues of labor, like Nixon mentioned. Other laws, for example, the Water Act, it could be the Land Act, which requires that participation is paramount. And in everything, all the policies, formulations, and the manner in which the implementation is being done by the different ministries is that public participation has to be conducted, including the County Government Act, which sets out the principles that participation is crucial at the county level, and even while doing land planning, land use planning, environmental protection, communities have to be engaged. Particularly Article 69 of the Constitution provides that the state shall maintain the environment for the best interest of the people. And this involves public participation, transparency, accountability.
Thank you, Masi. And normally they say wakili a minute, but with the way this discussion is going, I don't think 1 minute is enough for our wakili in the podium. So as we wind up, we normally talk about aspects of implementation, and Masi has talked about issues around legal and how governance structures have to work for, and also of course, the Constitution, and she's also touched on the Act. Nixon, we're talking about now monitoring. So we've done all these things, we've had all the grievance mechanisms, we've looked at social safeguards. What tools or frameworks can be employed to monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of these safeguards in real time?
Thank you. I think maybe before I answer that, I would want to take from where Paul left in terms of context. And I think for me, what you raised is very important in terms of everything being context specific. And I think sometimes we take it that what works in point A could work in point B. And I could give you a scenario. If you go to, for example, rural areas, maybe for the rural areas, it's the local stations that make sense, the local radio stations. But if you go to towns, maybe it's the TikTok and other things. And sometimes you want to use what worked for you in a different community, and you take to a different community and you feel frustrated, not because of anything else, but because you are not context specific to what you're doing. And as Paul has said, for example, even the PWDs, I'm very sure that the PWD in town will be different from PWD in rural area, for example. And the area that you address this will be different. But then back to what you're saying in terms of monitoring, I think, as you've said, the things about safeguards, that all the way from inception to implementation to everything. So make sure that you set in terms of how do you monitor whether, for example, the grievance mechanism is working. How do you ensure that the stakeholder engagements are working? Like say, setting that plan and going back to it and reviewing it from time to time, because even for stakeholder engagement plan, for example, there could be stakeholders that have come in that were not there when you started. There could be ones that are no longer interested. Because you see, the thing with safeguards is that you don't force people. If they are interested in working with you, well and good. If they are not, try convincing. If they are not, again, you may need to sometimes even stop or suspend whatever you want to do until they are more comfortable. And we've had instances, I think, in Botuto, the best scenario that we had, where there was an EU project that was supposed to be big, but when they realized that issues about women are not being taken into account, the donors just pulled off because they realized that this thing, maybe it could end up having a worse impact that was intended. And I think for safeguard, one of the things we say is that in the worst scenario, do no harm. The best scenario, do good. If you realize that you can't do good, leave it at the way as it is. So make sure that from the word go, you have those indicators, you have the plan to say that every 3 months or every 6 months, you review what you've done, the mitigation of measures working or not. If they're not working, so how do you review them? And do this not in an office somewhere. Work with the communities, work with the partners so that it's more organic and generated from them rather than sitting somewhere and saying that, you know what, now this works, maybe it won't work. So again, going back to them, having those monitoring on the indicators and all those outcomes, reviewing them from time to time, whether they're working or not, and learning from that. Because again, one of the things that I say, I know you're coming almost to that, one of the things we've learned is that safeguards is not a role of one person, it's a role of everybody in the institution. Everybody from the CEO to a cleaner. Because again, if you take the role of one person, it means that things could be burning on one side and you are on the other side. So make sure that everybody wants to be part of this so that it's taken, they all take it into account. I've seen instances where program staff are very good in terms of safeguards, but the operations are maybe lagging behind because they're not part of the process. And realize that there's something small, like we sometimes joke that you're talking about riparian protection, but the hotel that you're working in is a riparian. So what are you talking about? It's because maybe the person who booked for you that hotel doesn't understand why you're talking about this. So ensure that everybody is part of this. Ensure that it's from the beginning. Paul talked about projects. Talk from inception all the way to the end. Don't wait for like 2 years down the line to come and monitor say it's working or not. If you didn't start from the beginning, maybe you're talking to the wrong people. Maybe the stakeholders you're working with are not the right ones. Maybe they've changed. Maybe they've changed their consent. Maybe what you're addressing is not what is a priority for these people. So again, ensure that it's from the beginning to the end with a way that people feel comfortable working with you. If they're not comfortable, make sure that that is addressed. And again, the other thing with safeguards, make sure that you document every process. Because sometimes things may not work well, and when they don't work well, it's your documents and the minutes that you go back to. If they're not there, then it's your word against the whole world. And most of the time, you will not win.
That's true. Thank you, Nick. And as we come almost to the very end of this conversation, sadly, because I know there's so much to talk about, Nick has talked about changes. So I want to, Marcy, then I'll come to you, Paul, on that aspect. Marcy, what trends do you foresee in future development of environmental social safeguards, especially with issues around climate change and sustainability being a very hot topic currently? What new trends do you foresee in that sector?
Particularly, I want to reflect on emerging climate and mitigation and adaptation strategies, which includes the carbon drain plus projects. Currently, they're on the rise and they're being implemented. And communities are not aware of how these projects come about, how do they affect them. And so it is critical for rigorous capacity building to be conducted, because we are foreseeing a future where either communities will be excluded or will be included. So the most critical part is to be proactive rather than reactive. And what we need to do right now is to capacity build the communities so that we are on the same page. In the event that we end up in a reactive approach, we are going to have a lot of climate litigation matters, and we are foreseeing a situation where we might have ecocide being included in the penal code. And ecocide means a crime or an offense against nature, or a situation where we are going to have just transition because we capacity built the communities and now they are aware of what these adaptation mechanisms involve. And so there's just transition into the space where now we are conserving the environment, and so we have a proper integration into the future in terms of response to climate change. And so I foresee a future where, looking at initiatives that we are currently doing, we are foreseeing a future where there will be just transitions. Communities will be involved and they will be able to realize the economic, social, and cultural rights.
Thank you. Ecocide is going to be a new trend, and also proactiveness and community inclusion is a new trend as well.
Yeah.
As we wrap up now, and I want to, this is for all you lovely panelists, what message would you like to convey to project implementers regarding the importance of prioritizing environmental social safeguards, and how can the listeners who we have here be able to really engage in more robust environmental social safeguards in their communities? So maybe Paul, especially for you, I'd really like to know how our listeners, actually for listeners, because I'm also a young person who's worked with young people who maybe are not even aware about safeguards or the definition of it, because as all of you have said, sometimes we know what safeguards are, we just maybe haven't put these fancy names and fancy titles to it. So how can listeners be able to get involved when it comes to advocating for better when it comes to social safeguards?
Okay, thank you for the question. For the community to understand about the environmental social safeguard, let us take it literally. Environment, it what surrounds us. And social goes to the community. And the safeguard is something of protection. And particularly if one is touched, particularly on his or her part of the security wise, part of whatever one is doing or activity, then he or her, the social safeguard is touched or is triggered. So one should understand that it is something that it is able one to stay well without being triggered and feel well accessible despite whatever is going on. Or take it to the project point of it. When a project it is being implemented or it is being brought up, the community or the person or the stakeholders should be involved, so that whatever comes from it, whether it is affecting their lives, whether it is affecting their economic value at that particular point, maybe there's family taking up, maybe there's a job or a premises ought to be demolished. So it's something that it is triggering to their normal living. So it's something that they should understand and then they should know, and then they should air their grievances, particularly after letting them know there is slots, there is centers, there is toll-free numbers, there are committees in place from down there locally up to a certain level of whereby the project initiators and the funders of the project. Yes.
Thank you so much, Paul. So again, to all of you, the message to the project implementers on the importance of safeguards and how the listeners can be involved in advocating for this. Mercy?
Yes. Yeah, environment and social safeguards are very important, and so it is crucial that even as we engage these particular communities, we make them aware. What are these safeguards we are talking about? How does it apply to them? How best can they do to ensure that they promote the conservation of the environment while ensuring that they realize their economic rights under the environment? And this includes ensuring that we promote their own traditional practices. For example, some of our target groups include indigenous people, and they have indigenous knowledge that they implement or play in conserving the environment. So it is crucial that the stakeholders and people that are trying to implement these safeguards promote this indigenous knowledge, that they are factored into policies and form part of the laws, so that there is just transition, so that we don't end up in a future where there is a very big clash between humans and nature, because many people in the world rely on nature for livelihood. And so it is crucial for these particular stakeholders to be aware of this. And yeah, also ensure that the way in which they implement the projects envision the community needs. This includes the different gender roles that have been segmented within the communities. This includes traditional practices that these communities play. This also includes the setup and the engagements that are being conducted. They should promote the values of that particular community. And this includes accepting different social norms that communities are accustomed to. So,
Thank you, Mercy. Nixon.
I think let me start by another question that you asked Mercy in terms of emerging challenges in safeguarding. I think for me one of the things is technology is an opportunity, but it could be a challenge. And I'll speak about AI, for example. The instances we have seen people's faces being imposed into other things. And I'm just wondering, as human beings, what happens if, for example, you find your face being used for other things that maybe you didn't intend to do. So that's something that we're not talking about, but it could be a challenge in future when we stop being human beings and technology takes over. But anyway, it's not that we fear technology, but in terms of the safeguard arena, it could be an instance in terms of people now upping their game to deal with what could be emerging and in the future. The other thing is that, for example, in Africa now, there is a bulging population of young people, and maybe sometimes the standards are totally different. So again, it's upon all of us in terms of embracing this, so that we don't see that as a threat, but rather as an opportunity to ensure that everything works in place. But in terms of, as we come to the end, I think for me, one of the things I always say is that most affected, most involved. Don't take it for granted that the people who are most affected don't have views. They have opinions, they have views. So give them that in terms of them making that decision. But sometimes when you sit somewhere else and think that this works, sometimes it won't work, or sometimes you realize when you've invested so much money, you've done so much damage and it's not working and you have to start again. But if you just listened and gave the people who are most affected to be most involved, because why, for example, would the guy who is not into farming be advising farmers? The farmers maybe know best what works for them, for example. But sometimes when we think that we think for them, they'll be part of the game basically for maybe other interests that are not related to farming. For example, in a farming scenario. So ensure that the most affected are most involved. Also ensure that as you do your safeguards, sometimes you need resources to do these things. So don't think that it will be always free. Make sure that it's resourced. The other thing is ensure that, as I said before, everybody is involved in organization. Don't make it 2 or 3 people with the rest looking at you. If everybody is involved, that means that everything works well. Make sure again that you keep updating yourself, you keep updating these processes so that they don't become obsolete. Imagine what worked 20 years ago may not be working now. And if that's what you still go back to, maybe being told of lecturers who still use the notes that they used on students to teach people. So imagine the kind of research they're doing to those students. So again, ensure that you keep constantly changing, keep constantly improving, keep constantly upgrading that so that it makes sense. Again, what works in one organization may not work in the next organization because of resources, because of context because of so many things. So again, every donation would want to have their own safeguard, not necessarily imposed by donors, because again, that's one of the things that we keep forgetting. Donors have their own interests that could not work for you again. So ensure that again, it's something that you'd want to do without even the donors. I think that's the right way to do things, without necessarily being pushed or without being told that if you don't have this, you not get funds. It should be that, like, your DNA to do it. And again, back to what I was saying about most involved, most affected, most involved. Imagine you wanted to, people are planning your wedding without you knowing, and you realize that you don't even know who's supposed to marry you, who's supposed to marry. How would you feel? You'd feel very bad, yeah? So sometimes that's what we do to the communities. We almost strip them naked when you come with ideas and you say that if you don't do this, then you're going to the next community. That's almost like blackmail, yeah? So they should be ready to tell you that give us time to go think about it, yeah? But sometimes you come with ideas and you say that if you don't get an answer today, you're not giving me an answer. And the Senate always give, and Mercy as the lawyer will know this. For example, when Constitution was being, the process of Constitution, the guys who've gone to school would call for lawyers to break it down for them. But the community members, they would go and ask them, so what is your opinion? Why can't you bring that lawyer to the community to break it down for them? If you can take it to the professors and doctors and people in parliament, then you can also take it to the communities to break it down for them. But most of the time, because we feel that the more schooled you are, the more money you have, then you are what? You have more of an opinion than the next person. Then the communities look at you and say, if you want to do it, then do it, and then you realize it's not working. I've had scenarios where people have done bridges that after some time the river is seasonal, it stand, and the bridge is no longer making any sense apart from people taking photos on top of it. So again, I think for me, let's do the right things. Let's ensure that, for example, participation is a right. It's not something that you're doing as a privilege. Like Paul is saying, for example, there are rights that, for example, the PWDs, you're not giving them a privilege. That's what you need to do. I was telling somebody the other day, why is it that when you land at the airport, you don't give money to the pilot? Because that's his role, yeah? So why do you then give money to the police for catching a thief? Why was he employed in the first place? Why should you give me money for facilitating a meeting? Why have the WF employed me to do what? Yeah. Apart from saying thank you for this, I think it doesn't need to go beyond that, because then it crosses the line of corruption versus other things. So again, for me, I think safeguarding is the right thing to do, and the only thing is that you have to have as many champions as possible and make it in a way that people realize that even the things that we've been doing before, because even all these forests that we're seeing here, the indigenous forests, is it us who planted them? They're planted by people before us. But we now feel that we are more important, we need to now be the ones doing all these things. If you don't realize that, then you'll be doing things, somebody say that madness is doing things the same way every other day and expecting different results. It's not work. So thank you so much.
Thank you. That was one way to end this conversation. Although this conversation is not really over, I think there's many platforms for us to still be able to engage on issues around the ESSF. I hope we have learned something, or as much as possible, I have learned a lot. And I have been your great moderator. My name is Lynn Modesta. I'm a member of the Kenya Water Ambassadors, and this has been a very engaging platform with the Kenya Rua podcast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Make sure you subscribe. Please make sure you subscribe. I insist on subscribing. Make sure you subscribe, and we'll be having more of these conversations. If you want to see more topics that maybe you're also interested in, feel free to also comment the same for us. Thank you very much to my lovely panelists. You have been very educative, and we're looking forward to having more of these conversations with you and more of these discussions as well. I think even as the questions come in the comment sections, hopefully we can be able to still come to you on the same. So asanteni sana, and yes, see you guys soon. Thank you.
Thank you.